SFX. Urgent, low freak subasdrome. Stand at the corner of Yanhe Road and South Binjiang Avenue in Guangzhou on any given morning and look south toward the Pearl River. The tower rises above you in a hyper-reflective sheath of glass and structural steel, its lower 12 floors completely wrapped in heavy, industrial-grade blue construction netting and metal scaffolding, the kind of scaffolding that explicitly tells you the work is not finished. But this isn't an uncompleted project. It was officially handed over to buyers years ago. Look higher. The building carries a massive, brushed titanium emblem on its upper facade that you recognize immediately. Not as a domestic real estate developer, not as a state-owned infrastructure conglomerate. You recognize it as a hyper-luxury European automotive brand, SFX. Swoosh of a speeding supercar, cutting to choppy tense percussion. The British brand Residences, the exact same name that appears on carbon fiber sports cars, costing more than an average family in Guangdong province will earn in an entire lifetime. A name globally synonymous with ultra-precise tolerance levels, computational fluid dynamics, and the unyielding engineering philosophy that absolute quality is never an accident. It is a metric, now. Look back down at the base of that 66-story hyper tower. Look closely at the structural retaining walls of the integrated multi-level parking podium. Look at the fissures. Those are not shrinkage cracks. Those are structural stress fractures weeping pressurized groundwater. If you are watching this investigative series for the first time, hit that subscribe button right now. Every single documentary on this channel exposes megastructures that mathematically and structurally should not exist in their current state, yet they do, unresolved, occupied, while the entities who reaped billions in profit remain completely insulated by legal walls. This concrete monument in Guangzhou might be the most flagrant example of structural branding deception we have ever uncovered. SFX. Tense news flash graphic sound effect. The British brand Residences at 300 Pearl River Boulevard Way was officially announced to international markets in 2017. The primary joint venture entity behind the project was Longcheng Business Developments, a prominent high-end developer directed by regional real estate tycoons Wang Guanhua and Li Jinlong. The marketing pitch was simple, aggressive, and highly effective. A 249-meter residential skyscraper situated on the absolute premium edge of the waterfront. Designed in deep aesthetic collaboration with a legendary automotive marque, units inside this vertical fortress were priced between 15 million yen and upwards of 350 million yen, depending entirely on floor elevation and custom interior layouts. At the apex sat the triplex Sky Mansion, a 3-story penthouse configuration boasting a private cantilevered infinity pool, a reinforced helicopter pad, and a high-speed vehicle elevator capable of lifting a supercar directly into a private, climate-controlled glass showroom inside the living room. The cheapest entry-level unit inside this tower cost more than an ordinary citizen could earn across 30 years of continuous labor. The digital renderings and sales materials didn't just suggest a partnership, they framed the building as a literal, physical manifestation of automotive engineering. The signature front grille geometry was woven into the structural steel sunshades. The brand's exact British racing green hue dominated the marble-clad sales gallery. Wealthy buyers swarmed the project. They flooded in from tech hubs in Shenzhen, financial districts in Shanghai, manufacturing empires in Dongguan, and legacy real estate funds in Hong Kong. They wired massive down payments directly into escrow accounts. They signed non-negotiable pre-sale contracts. Many paid the entire purchase price in cash before the main foundation raft had even completed its continuous concrete pour. By the time the main concrete core reached the 50th floor, over 390 premium units had been pre-sold. The total capital locked within those contracts exceeded 7.2 billion yen, 1 billion USD. On paper, it was one of the most financially successful luxury residential launches in the modern history of southern China. SFX, metallic drone sound, shifting to a hollow underwater ambience instruction, was pushed to its absolute limit. And by late 2022, the scaffolding began to fall, and the first wave of wealthy buyers took possession of their keys. But within 90 days of the first moving trucks arriving at the grand lobby, alarming reports began filtering through private owner networks. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with the structural envelope. The initial indicators appeared as water intrusion. Pressurized moisture was forcibly bypassing the heavy double-glazed glass curtains and structural aluminum frames during standard seasonal rainstorms. In the tropical, high-humidity climate of Guangzhou, a compromised building envelope is an existential crisis for internal materials. Water passing through structural joints quickly pooled behind premium imported wood paneling and drywalls, generating widespread black toxic mold. For owners who had just spent tens of millions of yuan, the reality was horrifying. Damp spots spreading across Italian limestone floors, distinct water stains creeping down structural columns, and the unmistakable sound of water dripping inside the utility shafts where everything was supposed to be bone dry. Then, the independent structural assessments leaked. The lower subterranean levels and the massive concrete columns of the integrated parking garage began showing deep, running diagonal cracks. These weren't the standard microfissures that occur when new concrete cures and undergoes minor thermal contraction. These were macro cracks, wide enough to insert a coin, running diagonally across critical load-bearing columns and shear walls, a pattern that structural engineers immediately identified as classic shear stress failure indicators. Photographs taken by worried residents quickly bypassed restricted group TS and exploded onto regional architectural forums. The images revealed a subterranean nightmare, a multi-billion yuan garage lined with temporary steel shoring jacks, hydraulic monitors attached to raw concrete pillars, and water bubbling up through structural cold joints in the floor. It looked less like an ultra-luxury residential oasis and more like an underground civil engineering project on the verge of a catastrophic hydraulic failure. SFX, sub-bass throb. Ticking clock metronome sounds underneath. To understand how a 7 billion yuan ultra-luxury tower begins to break down within months of completion, you have to look past the Italian marble finishes and dig deep into the raw, unforgiving engineering logs of the Guangzhou waterfront. This isn't just a story of bad luck, it is a story of extreme weight, volatile soil mechanics, and a blistering 24-month fast-track construction cycle where speed was prioritized over structural equilibrium. Let's look strictly at the numbers. Because numbers do not lie, the structural weight of the British brand residences is immense. The tower utilizes a massive central concrete core surrounded by 16 high-strength, steel-reinforced concrete outrigger columns. The total volume of concrete poured into the foundation raft alone exceeded 35,000 cubic meters, sitting on top of heavy structural steel beams designed to anchor a dead load of hundreds of thousands of metric tons. But a building is only as stable as the ground it rests upon. SFX, distant, hollow thud of a pilot driver, the municipal geography of Guangzhou, particularly the premium parcels hugging the Pearl River bank, presents an engineering nightmare. The geology here is not solid, predictable bedrock. It consists of thick, highly variable layers of alluvial silt, soft river mud, loosely consolidated sand fills, and highly porous, weathered limestone full of underground water channels. To build a 249-meter skyscraper on this soft riverbed, engineers cannot rely on shallow foundations. They must use deep foundation engineering. For this tower, the architectural blueprint specified more than 120 high-diameter, friction, and end-bearing concrete piles, driven deep into the earth. The design goal was to punch through the volatile river silt and anchor the tips of those concrete piles directly into the deep stratum of hard, intact siltstone. But according to leaked soil investigation logs and subsequent structural filings submitted to the Guangzhou Municipal Housing and Urban Rural Development Bureau, something went terribly wrong during the subsurface execution phase. In early 2023, automated laser telemetry systems installed along the building's structural core began registering a technical anomaly that sent shockwaves through the engineering teams. The building was moving. Specifically, it was experiencing differential settlement. Now, settlement itself is normal. Every massive skyscraper built on Earth will sink a few millimeters or centimeters into the ground as the massive weight of the structure slowly compresses the soil beneath it over the first few years. If the entire foundation sinks at the exact same rate, known as uniform settlement. The structural elements experience very little unintended internal stress. But differential settlement is a completely different monster. Differential settlement means one specific section of the foundation is sinking faster or deeper than another section. In the case of the British Brand residences, laser sensors confirmed that the southern edge of the tower, the side closest to the heavy hydraulic pressure of the Pearl River, was sinking at an accelerated rate compared to the northern edge facing the city grid. The differential delta wasn't just a fraction of a millimeter. According to independent engineering audits leaked by internal inspectors, the building's tilt had breached the strict verticality tolerances established by Chinese National Code GB 5007 for building foundations. The uneven sinking was twisting the lower floors of the skyscraper in real time. SFX, sharp high, ripping sound method for concrete under tension. When a 66-story tower twists, the physical consequences are immediate and violent. The structural steel frame and concrete shear walls are forced to accommodate massive, unintended torsional and bending forces. This explains the frightening macro cracks tearing through the subterranean parking garage. The concrete elements are literally being sheared apart as the south side of the building pulls downward while the north side resists. This structural distortion instantly rippled upward through the entire height of the skyscraper. On the 20th, 45th, and 60th floors, residents began documenting bizarre, systemic failures. Luxury double-glazed window units, engineered to withstand typhoon-force winds, were suddenly cracking spontaneously under massive structural compression. Heavy fire-rated entry doors became jammed inside their frames because the structural openings had warped from rectangular to trapezoidal shapes. By mid-2024, the Guangzhou Municipal Construction Commission stepped in, issuing a series of urgent, non-public inspection notices. The official timestamps on these documents reveal a frantic back and forth between municipal safety inspectors, the primary developer Longcheng Business Developments, and the elite structural engineers from the China Academy of Building Research who were rushed to the site to analyze the structural core. The subsequent testing was rigorous. Engineers used ultrasonic pulse velocity equipment to map the internal voids within the concrete pillars and deployed specialized ground-penetrating radar to scan the foundation raft beneath the lowest basement level. What they found was a terrifying combination of geological instability and potential construction shortcuts. The data suggested that several of the deep foundation piles may have been driven into unstable limestone caverns, underground voids common in South Florida and southern China's karst topography, without adequate structural grouting. As the full weight of the finished tower compressed the ground, these undetected subterranean cavities began to collapse under the pressure, causing the localized pile failure and triggering the uneven sinking of the southern facade. Through all of this mounting technical chaos, as the laser metrics worsened and the structural repair costs skyrocketed, one very prominent entity maintained a calculated, ironclad, and legally flawless silence. The European automotive brand whose name was bolted to the facade in giant titanium letters. To the ultra-wealthy buyers who had invested their life savings into this tower, the brand's silence felt like a total betrayal. But to corporate lawyers, it was the completely predictable outcome of a highly lucrative, zero-liability corporate strategy known as brand licensing. SFX, low, hollow industrial hum changing to a metallic drone. The structural crisis unfolding at the British Brand residences in Guangzhou is not an isolated architectural anomaly. To truly comprehend the scale of what is happening along the banks of the Pearl River, we have to look across the wider landscape of modern Chinese skyscraper development. The systemic vulnerabilities exposed in this luxury high-rise, unstable riverfront soil, extreme weight distribution anomalies, and the catastrophic impact of localized differential settlement echo some of the most complex engineering battles ever fought in China's major urban centers. When you push a mega structure past the 200-meter mark on soft alluvial soil, you are waging an active war against physics. And it is a war that Chinese engineers have been analyzing for decades. SFX, dramatic cut energy percussion. consider the most famous historical precedent for foundation movement in modern engineering, the infamous case of the Lotus Riverside Complex in Shanghai. In 2009, a newly constructed 13-story residential block did not just experience minor cracking. It completely tipped over onto its side, remaining almost entirely intact as it crashed into the mud. The root cause? A combination of lateral soil pressure caused by excavated dirt piled on one side of the building and massive hydraulic instability caused by the nearby riverbank. While that was a much shorter structure, the fundamental lesson for Chinese civil engineers was clear: water, mud, and uneven lateral forces will destroy a foundation with absolute mathematical certainty. But what happens when you scale that problem up to a super tall skyscraper? Look no further than the financial heart of China, the Pudong district in Shanghai. During the construction of the iconic Shanghai Tower, the second tallest building on Earth, civil engineers faced a soft clay geology remarkably similar to the porous riverfront of Guangzhou. To prevent the massive 632-meter tower from tilting or sinking unevenly, engineers had to execute a continuous 63-hour foundation pour, creating a massive concrete foundation raft 6 meters thick, anchored by 955 high-strength structural piles driven deep into the deep soil stratum. Even with that world-class engineering, during the excavation of the surrounding basement complexes, large structural cracks began tearing through the street pavement and public plazas surround the Pudong Towers. The massive weight of these skyscrapers causes the surrounding soft ground to shift and settle in a vast, unpredictable radius. SFX, deep rumbling resonance. The engineering community in China has long recognized that riverfront zones are high-risk development environments. In cities like Wuhan, where massive skyscrapers line the Yangtze River, and in Tianjin's Yujiapu Financial District, developments built on reclaimed land and soft mud flats have continuously battled underground water infiltration and soil compression. When the soil undergoes compaction at different rates across a large construction footprint, the internal stresses generated inside the structural frame are immense. What sets the British brand residences apart, however, is not just the soft ground. It is the geometric configuration of the building itself. The tower features a dramatic, tapering aerodynamic profile designed to mimic the sleek curves of a high-performance sports car. This means the distribution of structural mass is not completely uniform. The southern facade features a massive, cantilevered glass outrigger system that places a disproportionate amount of downward rotational force on the southern foundation piles. If the subsurface soil investigation fails to accurately map the subterranean limestone profile below that exact stress zone, the building creates its own structural pivot point. Furthermore, the domestic regulatory environment across China's major construction sectors has radically shifted over the last few years, following high-profile structural emergencies, such as the sudden, terrifying shaking of the 73-story Egg Plaza in Shenzhen in 2021, which forced a total emergency evacuation of thousands of occupants due to vortex-induced resonance and structural fatigue. Municipal housing bureaus across China have implemented zero-tolerance policies for structural movement. The Seg Plaza Crisis PR urged that a high-rise does not need to experience a total collapse to become completely unusable and financially ruined. The mere perception of structural instability destroys property values overnight and triggers massive regulatory intervention. SFX, tense. Rhythmic expert, voice over energy music. This is the rigid regulatory reality that Longcheng business developments and their wealthy buyers are running into. In the past, minor settling issues or facade leaks could be quietly managed by property management companies through continuous cosmetic repairs and structural grouting behind closed doors. But in the modern Chinese regulatory landscape, under the strict oversight of the China Academy of Building Research and Regional Construction Commissions, automated laser telemetry data cannot be hidden. When a luxury building crosses the critical safety threshold for verticality deviation or structural shear cracking, it is no longer just a private dispute between a developer and a wealthy buyer. It becomes a matter of public municipal safety. The The structural cracks in the Guangzhou parking garage are being tracked by the exact same technical parameters used to evaluate the country's massive high-speed rail networks and industrial bridges. The numbers are public to the regulators, the implications are severe, and the engineering precedents show that fixing a tilting 66-story skyscraper after it is fully occupied is one of the most expensive, legally radioactive procedures in the entire history of global construction. SFX, low, pregnant, piano chord, tense, emotional, human drama energy. Behind every multi-billion yuan engineering failure, behind the structural calculations, the laser telemetry metrics, and the legal non-disclosure agreements, there is a human cost. But inside the British brand residences in Guangzhou, that cost isn't being borne by ordinary working-class families. It is being paid by China's ultra-wealthy elite, entrepreneurs, tech executives, and real estate investors who believed that a record-breaking price tag was a mathematical guarantee of absolute structural safety. Let's look at the actual reality inside the tower through the eyes of the people who are currently trapped inside a sin. King multi-million-dollar assets FX. Swoosh of lighting transition to subdued lobby ambient sounds. Meet Mr. Zhang Wei, a 45-year-old venture capitalist from the nearby technology hub of Shenzhen. In 2018, at the absolute height of the luxury real estate boom along the Pearl River waterfront, Mr. Zhang was looking for a flagship property to cement his financial status. When the marketing team for Longcheng Business Developments flew him to the ultra-exclusive preview gallery in Guangzhou, he was completely transfixed by the architectural narrative. He didn't just see a high-rise. He saw a physical extension of the precision engineering heritage he admired in European sports cars. The sales representatives assured him that every single structural interface, from the high-performance window glazing to the subterranean foundation piles, was being built to a standard that mirrored the tight tolerances of a high-performance carbon fiber chassis. Mr. Zhang selected a 400-square-meter duplex apartment located on the 48th floor. The total purchase price was a staggering $65 million. Like many high-net-worth buyers in China's pre-sale real estate market, he was required to wire 50% of the capital upfront into an escrow account, with the remainder paid in full upon the building reaching its structural topping-out phase in late 2021. In total, he transferred over $9 million USD worth of capital before he was ever allowed to step foot inside the physical structure. For the first 3 months after he received his keys in late 2022, Mr. Zhang felt his investment was vindicated. The views of the Pearl River winding through the neon-lit skyline of Guangzhou were spectacular. The custom leather finishes in the private elevator lobby smelled exactly like the interior of a luxury grand tourer. Then came the historic summer monsoon season of 2023. SFX. Sound of rushing typhoon rain and wind buffeting a window in structurally. It started with a low, rhythmic whistling sound radiating from the massive structural aluminum mullions that secured his floor-to-soiling glass curtain wall. During a heavy afternoon storm, Mr. Zhang noticed a thin sheet of water moving rapidly across the imported white Grigio Carnico marble flooring in his primary living area. The water wasn't coming from an open window. It was being forced directly through the structural silicone seals, connecting the triple-pane glass panels to the external concrete outrigger columns. Within 48 hours, the structural deflection of the building envelope became so pronounced that the specialized German-engineered sliding doors leading to his cantilevered sky balcony completely jammed. The structural frame of the opening had warped by several millimeters under intense compression. When Mr. Zhang contacted the elite property management division of Longcheng Business Developments, he was told his issue was an isolated cosmetic defect caused by normal thermal expansion and contraction. They sent a maintenance crew to re-caulk the exterior seams using industrial sealant. But 3 weeks later, during another standard weather event, the seals ruptured again. This time, the water intrusion bypassed the floor membranes entirely and began running down the interior utility shafts, destroying over $1.2 million worth of custom acoustic plasterwork and high-end integrated electronics inside his private home theater room. SFX, tense, a self-serrating electronic beat, but Mr. Zhang's luxury nightmare was nothing compared to what was happening on the subterranean levels below his feet. In April 2024, a midnight emergency notification rattled the private WeChat group exclusively reserved for the building's owners. Another resident, Ms. Chen Li, an executive who owned an international logistics corporation and had purchased a mid-tier unit for 35 million yen, had gone down to the underground level 3 parking garage to check on her customized luxury vehicle. What she discovered was a scene that looked like an active civil defense crisis zone. The structural retaining wall separating the lowest parking tier, FR, on the high hydraulic pressure of the adjacent Pearl River had cracked open. A steady, pressurized stream of murky, silt-laden river water was actively jetting through a 2-meter-long diagonal fissure in the solid reinforced concrete shear wall. The sheer force of the incoming water had already flooded 3 adjacent parking bays, submerging several high-end vehicles in 20 centimeters of brackish water. More terrifyingly, the structural concrete columns supporting the massive ceiling slab directly above the flooded zone were displaying classic signs of explosive structural spalling. Under the immense, uneven weight distribution caused by the building's differential settlement, the internal steel rebar inside the pillars had begun to buckle, forcing large chunks of outer concrete to break off and crash onto the hood of a parked luxury sedan below. SFX, sound of rebar snap, cracking concrete resonance. Chen immediately filmed the scene on her smartphone. In the video, which quickly bypassed local censorship protocols and spread across regional real estate networks, you can clearly see building maintenance staff frantically stacking sandbags against the structural columns, while trying to deploy temporary hydraulic shoring jacks to brace the buckling ceiling slab. The concrete wasn't just cracking, it was actively shedding structural mass under extreme tension. The next morning, chunks of industrial blue netting and scaffolding were hastily erected around the entire base of the parking podium to hide the structural damage from public view. But the psychological damage to the residents was absolute. A coalition of over 80 wealthy owners, led by Mr. Zhang and Ms. Chen, took a step that is incredibly rare and legally complex inside the Chinese real estate ecosystem. They hired their own independent, third-party structural engineering firm from Shanghai to conduct a comprehensive forensic audit of the entire skyscraper's foundation and core column infrastructure. The independent engineering team spent 3 weeks deploying laser scanners, ultrasonic sensors, and core drilling rigs inside the garage. When the final confidential report was delivered to the owners' committee in late 2024, the findings were catastrophic. The data confirmed that the southern half of the tower's foundation raft had experienced more than 42 millimeters of localized downward displacement over a 12-month period, while the northern half had settled by less than 8 millimeters. This extreme differential delta had subjected the intermediate transfer floors to structural bending stresses far exceeding their maximum engineering design limits. The structural engineers explicitly stated that, if the settlement did not stabilize within the next 24 months, the structural integrity of the lower parking podium could be compromised, potentially forcing a mandatory municipal evacuation order. SFX, Hollow Dread Cord. Armed with this terrifying technical data, the owners attempted to launch a massive litigation campaign against the developer, Longcheng Business Developments, demanding a total contract rescission and a full refund of their billions of yuan. But China's luxury real estate legal framework is a labyrinth designed to exhaust even the wealthiest litigants. Longcheng's legal team immediately filed counterclaims, disputing the methodology of the independent Shanghai engineers and claiming that the structural movement was completely within the legal boundaries of predictable geological compaction. In the interim, the wealth of these elite buyers has been completely frozen. Real estate is inherently an illiquid asset, but a 50 million yuan luxury apartment inside a tower with widely documented structural cracking, public water intrusion issues, and an active municipal construction dispute is worth exactly zero on the open market. No high-net-worth buyer in China will touch a branded tower that is actively being monitored by laser telemetry for vertical structural failure. Mr. Zhang Wei, Ms. Chen Li, and hundreds of other owners are now forced to live inside a sinking monument to luxury branding, waking up every morning to look at cracks in their walls. While the lawyers continue to argue over who will pay for an engineering remediation project that might cost more than the original value of the land itself. SFX, low. Foreboding Simponic drone thumb. The compounding crisis at the British brand residences in Guangzhou has exposed a fundamental fracture line that extends far beyond the cracked concrete walls of a single luxury parking podium on the Pearl River. It has revealed the multi-billion yuan structural vulnerability lurking beneath the entire global business model of branded luxury real estate, a model that has transformed major Chinese urban centers into testing grounds for high-stakes trademark Li Xing as the litigation drags on into late 2026. The structural risks are not static. They are actively spreading through the building's physical frame and the broader real estate ecosystem of southern China. SFX, Hythmic, tense electronic T-ticking. Consider the engineering realities of what must happen next. The differential settlement affecting the southern facade of the skyscraper is the single most technically complex and cost-prohibitive structural defect a civil engineering team can encounter. When a 66-story tower settles unevenly on soft riverfront silt and compromised karst limestone, you cannot simply patch the cracks and walk away. The ultimate engineering remediation method is a high-risk process known as structural underpinning. To stabilize the British brand residences, engineering teams would have to drill through the existing lowest basement slabs, excavate the volatile soil beneath an occupied, vibrating super-tall tower, and drive entirely new, high-diameter micropiles deep into the underlying rock stratum to pick up the failing load of the southern columns. The cost of executing an operation of this magnitude on a 249-meter skyscraper is astronomical. It requires millions of dollars in specialized hydraulic equipment, continuous high-pressure concrete grouting, and real-time computer-controlled leveling jacks working simultaneously across dozens of critical load-bearing nodes. But the financial cost is only half the nightmare. The logistical reality is nearly impossible. To safely execute foundation remediation of this scope, large sections of the building's mechanical infrastructure, water lines, and structural columns must be exposed and modified. For a luxury high-rise containing hundreds of occupied, high-value units, the process would generate immense structural vibrations, deafening noise levels, and systemic utility shutdowns that would render the building completely uninhabitable for months, if not years. SFX, deep, reverberating metal shear sound, because a total evacuation and multi-billion yuan foundation overhaul would mean immediate financial bankruptcy for the developer, Longcheng Business Developments. A far more predictable and unsettling future scenario is currently playing out along the Guangzhou waterfront. The building is entering a state of managed structural imperfection. Instead of addressing the root cause, the failing friction piles driven into unstable limestone caverns, the developer's construction crews are executing endless rounds of cosmetic and secondary structural mitigation. Walk past the base of the tower today, and you will see that the industrial blue netting and heavy metal scaffolding have become a permanent architectural feature of the facade. Behind that netting, crews are continuously injected high-viscosity epoxy resins into the running cracks of the parking garage to slow down the high-pressure water intrusion from the Pearl River. Specialized cosmetic mortars are being slapped over the spalled concrete columns to hide the exposed steel rebar from the residents' cameras. On the upper residential floors, warped window seals are being aggressively refitted with heavy structural silicone, and jammed door frames are being physically planed down so they can click shut inside their distorted openings. The skyscraper is being kept structurally functional through a continuous, frantic cycle of corporate maintenance, while automated laser telemetry systems transmit real-time data back to the Municipal Housing Bureau, watching and waiting to see if the soil beneath the southern foundation will finally reach geological equilibrium before the internal shear stresses cross the point of no return. SFX swooshed to choppy percussion Tautra energy, and through it all, the giant brushed titanium emblem of the European supercar manufacturer remains bolted to the upper facade, completely untouched by the structural chaos below. The name continues to project an atmosphere of absolute mechanical precision, effortless elite status, and uncompromising quality to the millions of citizens who pass by the Pearl River bank every day. But for the wealthy buyers trapped inside, that name has taken on a completely different, cynical meaning. It serves as a permanent, vertical reminder of a massive legal and commercial illusion. They bought into a dream of automotive perfection, translated into steel and glass. What they actually purchased was an apartment in a building constructed on soft river mud by a local real estate firm that had simply paid a premium fee to lease a trademark. The precision was on the badge. The reality was in the mud. As the sun sets over the Guangzhou skyline, the lights inside the upper-tier sky mansions flicker on, casting long reflections across the water. The legal bills continue to mount. The structural cracks continue to weep. The telemetry lasers continue to measure the millimeters of movement. And the multi-billion yuan tower continues to sink. SFX, Urgent Row Music Punch. If you want to see how this engineering battle resolves and which luxury towers are cracking next, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below. We will see you in the next investigation.